Hi, I'm Anthony Originello, CEO of the Chartered Professionals in Human Resources for BC and Yukon. We represent more than 8,000 members, and as the organization dedicated to advancing the HR profession through education, advocacy, awareness, professional development, as well as our recognized and impactful CPHR designation, we are proud to be a sponsor of this show. We have been the voice of the HR profession since 1942. Learn more about us at cphrbc.ca.
In this edition of Careers That Matter, I'm joined by Don Stickney, the founder of Playbook. Don, welcome.
Great to be here.
Let's talk about what Playbook is and then what your job is once we get a sense of what the company is.
Sure. So Playbook's a growth and resilience team. We work primarily in three areas: government relations, communications, and go-to-market. And we do all of that in the context of understanding how technology can be leveraged in service of the business, but also our clients, particularly as it relates to AI.
So you're the founder. Are you a CEO or the boss, or how do you describe your job beyond founder?
Entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. This edition of consulting company that I'm involved with is something I came up with myself, as opposed to the other versions where, I was a partner and joining something that was midstream and helping scale and build that. This company is really built for the moment now and where I see consulting heading and what clients' needs are.
So what does a workday look like for you?
Good question. I mean, they all vary. So if you're a consultant, you just have to be on the clock 24/7. So, a call can come in. There can be a crisis that needs to be dealt with. You've got your regular book of business and scheduled calls with clients that you're managing in that portfolio too. A lot of work, which is not nearly as as sexy as consulting is portrayed, is intelligence gathering and outreach. So you're constantly in a mode where you're gathering information, figuring out what's relevant for your clients, what's relevant maybe for some new business opportunities, or where there's something where you just want to be positioning yourself as a thought leader in market. Certainly there's an expectation that you're kind of always ahead of the curve in terms of what's going on. So
well, you also have a bit of an outward profile as well that you have to deal with. For instance, doing interviews like this one. What's the balance between sort of the internal working of what you're doing in servicing your clients, but also making sure that you're visible to the community?
Yeah, that is a key challenge for sure. And then the expectation on the external stuff grows. I mean, I've been a consultant for 20 years, and I would say the external branding, marketing that I've done in the last year is the most I've done in my entire career. And I'm talking about the accumulation prior. I've done more in the last year than I did in those 19 years. So it is a challenge, but as a consultant, as a problem solver, I enjoy challenges. So this is a new opportunity, get out, learn a new skill, expose myself to different environments. Certainly there is an expectation, though, from people you work with, attracting talent to your consulting practice. Have a number of people I work with, attracting new business, just positioning yourself with your clients. They're not just looking for advice or strategy anymore. They really want to see you as a thought leader and someone who's contributing to the greater good.
You also have to be bookkeeper, accountant, sales manager, the whole works. Because you're a shop of how many?
Shop of 8 people right now.
Right.
And growing. You do, but the tools out there are pretty good. And I'm fortunate. I've managed bigger consulting environments. I was with an agency, started out quite small. It was about 20 people, built that up to almost close to 200 people and played key roles in terms of the management, whether that be operational, HR, finance, business development, sales. Huge passion of mine, for sure. I love doing that work. I think the key to any type of work is if it doesn't feel like work, you don't mind the hours you're putting into it. And I've been fortunate that a career in consulting has very much been that kind of environment for me.
Well, let's come back to what you were talking about the hours, because you said you're always on. You're always on.
Yeah, I try to reserve certain time for my family in the evenings, particularly I have a young family and want to spend that quality time with my family.
Are you any good at that?
I generally, my rule is between kind of 5 to 8. If someone calls, I'm going to take the call, but if it's an email, it doesn't feel urgent. But certainly the first thing you're up in the morning, or even sometimes calls come at 11:30 at night or even later, you're picking up the phone and you're going to respond to the situation. A lesson I learned very early on in consulting is if you don't do that, someone else will. And I was fortunate that I was the someone else who was willing to, and their consultant did answer the phone. So that stuck with me, and I just always apply that mentality.
Are you a little bit like me in the middle of the night? Suddenly you go, oh, and like I can be working out challenges while I'm trying to still catch some sleep, but I can't turn it off.
Yeah, I mean, sure. So you're at the gym, you're on the treadmill, or you're lifting weights or whatever. You're always thinking, shower's another place I find a lot of consulting strategy goes on. I try to, particularly in the evenings, you got to shut down at some point. So I certainly try to reset that. I do that by planning. Okay, what do I need to focus on the next day? And maybe even a little further in that, like what do the next few weeks look like? If you've ever worked with me, I talk in the context of quarters too. So, what does that next quarter look like? What do we got to get done during the quarter, and try to focus the team around that.
So, because so much of the focus of this program is I want young people to be able to look at you and go, okay, wow, that's quite the job. But then how did you get here? So let's go back. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school in Surrey. I went to Holy Cross High and transitioned then to UBC. So I did it.
So when you're leaving high school, did you say, yep, in 2025, I want to be the founder of a consulting company called Playbook? Was that on the landscape at all, or what were you thinking when you left high school?
No, I think in those early days, I mean, I was really focused. I was selling hot tubs on the corner of King George for Beachcomber hot tubs.
On the corner?
Yeah. Well, the shop was right there on the corner. So it was interesting. I mean, you deal with all walks of life in that business, and certainly it's very sales-oriented environment. So I knew I was going to be in an environment where it was communications focused, it was relationship focused. What I really had to be taught was the strategy, the pattern recognition, a lot of the skills that you can only learn by immersing yourself in a field. But I think what was unique about my background is that I was someone who was willing to walk up, strike up a conversation with anyone and try to figure out the problem and talk to them about a potential way I could help them. So,
do you have any sense of why you were so predisposed? Because that's anathema to me.
Interesting, yeah. One thing my parents always said about me, what they thought was a little strange, but from a young age, I was always consuming the news media. So even when I was like 6, 7 years old, watching the news, 6 o'clock or noon if you're home on the weekend or whatever. And I remember doing that. I was always curious about what was going on in the world. And then certainly as my education grew, became very interested in civics and the application of how different levels of government interacted and what their responsibilities were, and kind of married that with a background in like English lit and philosophy and history. So taking kind of all those disciplines and really thinking about problems present day that were informed from historical context, but also modern events, and thinking about what are we going to do about this. So in some ways, it just feels like I was constantly already in that intelligence gathering mode. I'm just curious and hungry for information.
So you come out of high school with this natural curiosity and an ability to sell hot tubs. You go to university. What did you study?
Political science, not surprisingly.
So you knew that you were going there.
And philosophy, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I anticipated a career in sales, but I got heavily involved in politics at the time, and they gave me an opportunity. I worked in government very briefly in that minority government. I'm not sure I offered a lot of value to the taxpayer, but was fortunate I got exposed to David Emerson, who was the industry minister, who really brought that lens of government and business together for me. And I saw that as, well, that's probably the space I want to work in. And
So did that gig in the minority government happen while you were still at university, or had you graduated?
there was a little bit of overlap there.
Yeah.
I wasn't the most studious for my last semester at UBC, but my profs passed me anyway, so I was grateful for that.
You couldn't wait to get out there.
Certainly by the time I hit year 4, I was ready. And I mean, it's kind of funny and nostalgic to think back, but we were very excited about Paul Martin becoming Prime Minister. It was probably, one of the most exciting periods of my life in terms of context around how I felt about the country and my future. And it's interesting because it aligns with the way I'm feeling these days.
So did that lead to an opportunity to work within Paul Martin's government?
Yes.
What was your role there?
I was the advisor, so political advisor, policy advisor to a number of different cabinet ministers.
Good job.
It's a good job to understand why you don't want to be a cabinet minister. So anyone who's thinking about elected office, they should go work for one first. And you see firsthand just how hard they work and the sacrifices they make. I think, what appealed to me about working in government at an early age was the idea that I was going to be in the room for big decisions that I would just not get consulted on if I was in a typical business environment. And that proved to be very true. I was in the room for a lot of important things.
So Prime Minister Paul Martin's term came to an end. Where'd you go from there?
So it was a big challenge. I don't know if you remember, David Emerson crossed the floor. So those were some auspicious circumstances to seek employment in. I decided at that point I wanted to be a consultant and went and talked to kind of everyone I knew in the agency world and shopped myself around, and their view was, you're too young, you don't have enough experience, you should go back into government, you should work in Victoria. All these pieces of feedback that were probably irrelevant, but I ignored all of them and I just started my own consultancy. And I proved that skill I learned selling hot tubs was relevant to selling consulting services.
So you're just like, okay, I hear you. You're not going to give me work, but
Yeah.
I believe in myself.
Yeah.
And away you went. What was your first venture?
So I did some work with Rick Hansen Foundation, and that was really interesting, rewarding work at the time, getting to know Rick and the team around him and their vision for spinal cord injury and solutions that ultimately would help people who had those types of circumstances live better quality of life. And we were very successful, got a lot of funding out of government. I'm not necessarily going to claim that I was the big reason for that. I mean, Rick is a pretty convincing individual and certainly was a big part of the advocacy effort.
From there, where'd you go?
From there, I transitioned to a bigger agency and worked at Fleischman Hillard for about 6 years.
Oh, so one of them actually did hire you at that point.
Yeah, at that point, they saw I could get clients. They saw that I was not going away and that I was working in the field. And I was pretty open and humble about that I needed to learn the consulting end of the business. I was maybe good at the sales aspect of it. But what I was really seeking was an opportunity to get the skills that would carry me forward in my career.
How long did you stay with them?
I was there for about 6.5 years, and then I was poached to join Earnscliffe Strategies as a partner, and that was a life-changing decision.
What year was that?
That would have been 2013.
And you built that business.
Yes, very much. We scaled it significantly in this market across Canada. I led acquisitions for the company for a period, certainly did a lot of the hiring, all the key personnel decisions, spent a lot of time, had a number of great people I worked with that helped make that happen as well, and certainly grateful for all of that experience. There's a lot of very talented people that made that happen.
And then you moved on to create Playbook.
Yeah.
Wow. What a career.
Hopefully there's more chapters to come.
I would hope so. You're a young man.
Relatively, but yeah, for really focusing now on Playbook, and then also working with Industrial AI, which is a AI consulting business, and helping them grow in terms of their profile and presence, but also finding those opportunities where technology, business, public sector are all going to integrate. I'm a firm believer that AI is going to be a massive change agent inside every organization. And 5 years from now, we're going to look back at the change that occurred and just be blown away by what this technology has done.
So if you take a look at yourself, and I know we talked about that you had this innate ability to be able to just talk to anybody about anything, which is a fantastic skill, but you also were willing to take chances, you believed in yourself. What would you say is a characteristic that you possess, and maybe you discovered it about yourself along the way, that you go, okay, that was important for me to be able to get to here? What would that be?
I think grit, resilience, people tell you no, or you get kicked down, or you fail, and you just gotta get back up and try again. And I mean, I will say, in addition to that, the feeling of winning, which, can happen in the context of business, you win an engagement, you deliver for your clients, you get them what you want. That's a feeling, and certainly in politics, you can win an election, those sorts of things. That can't be replicated for me. And I think that also comes from a deep background and growing up and playing competitive sports. I'm a hyper-competitive person. So if someone tells me I can't do something, I definitely want to prove them wrong. And even if I don't accomplish it, I'm going to try it again.
As you're saying that, I can't help but think about Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena, where he talks about, when you stand up and you take these chances, you get battered and beaten and bloodied, and you don't always win. But if you keep going, and by putting yourself out there, you'll never be in that cold and lonely place with those people who never dared to try at all. And you've gone out and dared to do it. And in doing so, you've created opportunities for others.
Yeah, and that's something I take a lot of pride in.
Yeah.
Is when you're an entrepreneur, you're creating space. And, in a lot of cases, I've been very fortunate that a lot of those people have gone on to have very successful careers, and having some small part in that journey is very rewarding. I love giving back. I love mentoring. All of your listeners should know, if someone reaches out to me and asks me for some of my time, I'm always happy to give it. I certainly experienced a lot of barriers in terms of getting into the field and the industry I wanted to work in. I don't know that those exist as much today as they did before, but there are lots of challenging fields to break through in. And I'm feeling like the work I'm doing now in AI is one of those other spaces where probably a lot of people feel that if they don't have the technology background, and certainly I don't, that they can't get into this work. And I'm proving them to be absolutely wrong about that. I think there's huge opportunity for non-technical people in AI.
Well, thanks for giving us an insight into your current work and your career path.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on the show.